Hello everybody, Nerdy Friend here. Welcome to No Lives Left, and I'm going to tell you a story. Now I'm going to tell you the tale of the Red Mist, aka Squidward's suicide. Now, Squidward's suicide is supposed to be set in a time like right after the SpongeBob movie came out, the first one, the original one, the one that was good, with David Hasselhoff, that one. And it's supposed to be a creepypasta about some kind of sick joke or whatever. That's what I get from it, based off the video that I'd seen on the internet. I mean, I'm pretty sure we've all seen it. But I will show it somewhere in the bottom part of the screen so that way you can see the video as I'm reading it along. So, without further ado, let's dig into the pasta. Squidward's suicide, aka the Red Mist, vice versa. I just want to start off by saying, if you want an answer at the end, prepare to be disappointed. There just isn't one. I was an intern at Nickelodeon Studios for a year in 2005 for my degree in animation. It wasn't paid, of course. Most internships aren't. But it did have some perks beyond education. To adults, it might not seem like a big one, but most kids at the time would go crazy over it. Now, since I worked directly with the editors and animators, I got to view the new episodes days before they aired. I'll get right to it without giving too many unnecessary details. They had very recently made the SpongeBob movie, and the entire staff was somewhat sapped of creativity, so it took them longer to start up the season. But the delay lasted longer for more upsetting reasons. There was a problem with the Series 4 premiere that set everyone and everything back for several months. Me and two other interns were in the editing room along with the lead animators and sound editors for the final cut. We received a copy that was supposed to be Fear of a Krabby Patty and gathered around the screen to watch. Now, given that it isn't final yet, animators often put up mock title cards, sort of an inside joke for us, with phony, oftentimes lewd titles, such as How Sex Doesn't Work, instead of Rock Bye Bye Valve when SpongeBob and Patrick adopt a sea scallop. Not particularly funny, but work-related chuckles. So when we saw the title card Squidward's Suicide, we didn't think it more than a morbid joke. Okay. One of the interns did a small throat laugh at it. What the fuck's a throat laugh? The happy-go-lucky music plays as is normal. The story began with Squidward practicing his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes like normal. We hear SpongeBob laughing outside, and Squidward stops, yelling at him to keep it down, as he has a concert that night and needs to practice. SpongeBob says okay, and goes to see Sandy with Patrick. The bubble splash screen comes up, and we see the ending of Squidward's concert. This is when things began to seem off. While playing, a few frames repeat themselves, but the sound doesn't. At this, in parentheses it says, at this point sound is synced up with animation, so yes, that's not common. But when he stops playing, the sound finishes as if the skip never happened. There's slight murmuring in the crowd before they begin to boo him. Not normal cartoon booing that is common in the show, but you could very clearly hear malice in it. Squidward's in full frame and looks visibly afraid. The shot goes to the crowd, with SpongeBob in the center frame. He too is booing, which is very much unlike him. This isn't the oddest thing though. What is odd is that everyone had hyper-realistic eyes. Very detailed, clearly not shots of real people's eyes, but something a bit more than CGI. The pupils were red. Some of us looked at each other, obviously confused, but since we weren't the writers, we didn't question its appeal to children yet. The shot goes to Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed, looking very forlorn. The view out of his porthole window is of a night sky, so it isn't very long after the concert. The unsettling part is that at this point there is no sound. Literally no sound. Not even the feedback from the speakers in the room. It is as if the speakers were turned off, though their status showed them working perfectly. He just sat there, blinking, in this silence for about 30 seconds. Then he started to sob softly. He put his hands, in parentheses says tentacles, over his eyes and cried quietly for a full minute more. All the while a sound in the background very slowly growing from nothing to barely audible. It sounded like a slight breeze blowing through the forest. The screen slowly begins to zoom in on his face. By slow, I mean it's only noticeable if you look at the shots 10 seconds apart side by side. His sobbing gets louder, more full of hurt and anger. The screen then twitches a bit, as if it twists in on itself, for a split second, then back to normal. The wind through the trees sound gets slowly louder and more severe, as if a storm is brewing somewhere. The eerie part is this sound, and Squidward's sobbing sounded real, as if the sound wasn't coming from the speakers, but as if the speakers were holes and the sound was coming through from the other side. As good a sound as the studio likes to have, they don't purchase the equipment to be that good to produce sound of that quality. Why not? Below the sound of the wind and sobbing, very faint, something sounded like laughing. It came at odd intervals and never lasted more than a second, so you had a hard time pinning it. In parentheses, it says, "We watched this show twice, so pardon me if things sound too specific, but I've had time to think about them." After 30 seconds of this, the screen blurred and twitched violently, and something flashed over the screen as if a single frame was replaced. The lead animation editor paused and rewound frame by frame. What we saw was horrible. It was a still photo of a dead child. He couldn't have been more than 6. The face was mangled and bloodied. One eye dangling over his upturned face popped. He was naked down to his underwear, his stomach crudely cut open and his entrails laying beside him. He was laying on some pavement that was probably a road. The most upsetting part was that there was a shadow of the photographer. There was no crime tape, no evidence tags or markers, and the angle was completely off for a shot designed to be evidence. It would seem as if the photographer was the person responsible for the child's death. We were, of course, mortified, but pressed on, hoping that it was just a sick joke. The screen flipped back to Squidward, still sobbing, louder than before, and half body in frame. There was now what appeared to be blood running down his face from his eyes. The blood was also done in a hyper-realistic style, looking as if you touched it, you'd get blood on your fingers. The wind sounded now as if it were a gale blowing through the forest. There was even snapping sounds of branches, the laughing, a deep baritone lasting at longer intervals and coming more frequently. After about 20 seconds, the screen again twisted and showed a single frame photo. The editor was reluctant to go back, but we all were. But he knew what he had to do. This time the photo was that of what appeared to be a little girl, no older than the first child. She was laying on her stomach, her barrettes in a pool of blood next to her. Her left eye was popped out and popped. Naked except for underpants. Her entrails were piled on top of her above another crude cut along her back. Again, the body was on the street and the photographer's shadow was visible, very similar in size and shape of the first. I had to choke back vomit, and one intern, the only female in the room, ran out. The show resumed. About 5 seconds after the second photo played, Squidward went silent, as did all sound. Like it was when this scene started, he put his tentacles down, and his eyes were now done in hyper-realism like the others were in the beginning of the episode. They were bleeding, bloodshot, and pulsating. He just stared at the screen, as if watching the viewer. After about 10 seconds, he started sobbing, this time not covering his eyes. The sound was piercing and loud, and most fear-inducing of all is his sobbing was mixed with screams. Tears and blood were dripping from his face at a heavy rate. The wind sound came back, and so did the deep-voiced laughing, and this time, the still photo lasted for a good 5 frames. The animator was able to stop it on the 4th and back it up. This time, the photo was of a boy, at about the same age, but this time the scene was different. The entrails were being pulled out from a stomach wound by the large hand.
The red mist is coming.
The right eye popped and dangling, blood trickling down it. The animator proceeded. It was hard to believe, but the next one was different, but we couldn't tell what. He went on to the next, same thing. He went back to the first and played them quicker, and I lost it. I vomited on the floor, the animating and sound editors gasping at the screen. The 5 frames were not as if they were 5 different photos, they were played out as if they were frames from a video. We saw the hand slowly lift out the guts. We saw the kid's eyes focus on it, and we even saw 2 frames of the kid beginning to blink. The lead sound editor told us to stop. He had to call in the creator to see this. Mr. Hillenberg arrived in about 15 minutes. He was confused as to why he was being called there. So the editor just continued the episode. Once the few frames were shown, all screaming, all sound again stopped. Squidward was just staring at the viewer. Full frame of the face for about 3 seconds. The shot quickly panned out, and that deep voice said, "Do it!" And we see in Squidward's hands a shotgun. He immediately puts the gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger. Realistic blood and brain matter splatters in the wall behind him and his bed, and he flies back with the force. The last 5 seconds of the episode shows his body on the bed, on his side, one eye dangling on what's left of his head above the floor, staring blankly at it. Then the episode ends. Mr. Hillenberg is obviously angry at this. He demanded to know what the heck was going on. Most people left the room at this point, so it was just a handful of us to watch it again. Viewing the episode twice only served to imprint the entirety of it in my mind and caused me horrible nightmares. I'm sorry I stayed. The only theory we could think of was the file was edited by someone in the chain from the drawing studio to here. The CTO was called in to analyze when it happened. The analysis of the file did show that it was edited over by new material. However, the timestamp of it was a mere 24 seconds before we began viewing it. All equipment involved was examined for foreign software and hardware as well as glitches, as if the timestamp may have glitched and showed us the wrong time. But everything checked out fine. We didn't know what happened, and to this day nobody does. There was an investigation due to the nature of the photos, but nothing came of it. No child scene was identified and no clues were gathered from the data involved, nor physical clues in the photos. I never believed in unexplainable phenomena before, but now that I've had something happen and can't prove anything about it beyond anecdotal evidence, I think twice about things. And that is the story of Squidward's suicide. There was a lot of moments where there was parentheses, and it kind of derailed the story a tiny bit. I mean, I understand if it's like 1 or 2 times, but I read 4 times it was in parentheses. Like, that had moments of parentheses that it just kind of threw me off. It kind of breaks the fourth wall when it does that. There was a few moments where I had to add a word in while I was reading the story. Like, I gotta find the moment, but, it's, like, there was just some parts where the sentence was, I would like to say hastily written, and it wasn't really looked over a second time. Proofread. It helps. I think I had to add, like, simple words like the word and stuff like that. It's not a big deal, but you kind of have to stop and think which word would kind of fit in there. I'm good with Mad Libs, so it wasn't that hard for me. That's probably why I can't find where it was exactly. I'd have to read it again in order to find it and point it out. Oh, here's my big problem with this one. I seen it for the first time, and I was pretty much just like, you can't be serious. This is actually in here. The two words that should never be put together in the form of a compound word, whatever it was. Hyper-realistic. Oh, I hate that one so much. Oh, God, I hate it so much. If any of you know how I reacted when I was reading Sonic.exe, you'll know why I hate this so much. Hyper-realistic. Blood. Brain matter. Hyper-realistic. Everybody's eyes was hyper-realistic. Oh my god, I hate that so much. Hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it. It's not even a word. It's not a word. If you want to say something that looks like unrealistically realistic, that's the word. It's not correct. If you want to describe something as creepy, like in that sense, like bloodshot red eyes, and you're supposed to be crying blood and tears, basically, I would never use hyper-realistic because it's not a word. And it makes you sound like an amateur and you don't know how to write. This story isn't bad, it's just hyper-realistic. Oh yes, you must have a very long and very successful writing career. I hate that one so much. I'm ranting, but you just don't want to use that unrealistic word. Use something else, you know? It'd be better if you just said it was a, like, screenshot of somebody's eyeball. That would be more realistic than that. Also, the video was okay. Just some parts of it didn't quite correlate with the story. Of course, it can't be perfect, but I would have liked to have seen that the video would have those disturbing images of the children being dead. That would probably make the video better. Even though it's disturbing to think about that, but I'm sorry, that would have made the video a little bit more believable. I'm not sure how I feel about the main character of the story being an intern at Nickelodeon Studios and actually seeing this happen, and then watching it a second time. Come on. No. It doesn't seem like something a kid would actually do. Not even in real life. You know, that seems to be the problem with most writers. I don't feel like this person was writing what they know. That's basically the advice that every writer needs to have. Write about what you know. If you don't know it, look it up. This didn't feel like they knew how animation studios, such as Nickelodeon Studios, actually works. I mean, I've never really been in an animation studio myself, but I know things like that isn't that simple. It can't be. I mean, all those people get those crazy-ass degrees. It can't be that easy to just be an intern in there and, you know, if lead editor, I can just see it now, like, they just pull up a remote and be like, I'm just gonna rewind this frame by frame. No, they should have the fucking complicated fucking equipment and go back and look at that shit. I don't know. It doesn't seem like this was something that a normal editing room would be like, or a screening room. And even if it was a screening room or something like that, I don't like this. I don't like this very much. It just doesn't feel like this writer actually wrote about what they knew. That like I said, that seems to be a problem for most of these creepypastas. They're not writing about what they know. And to be a successful writer, that is the #1 piece of advice that could ever be given to any aspiring writer. Write about what you know. And if you don't know it, look it up, research it. Books, Google, anything. You know, there are ways to learn about this stuff. Just write about what you know, because this doesn't feel like you can actually be immersed into the story. It doesn't feel like you're actually there, you know? For someone to enjoy reading a story like this, you gotta feel like you're there. And in the parentheses about sorry about being so specific, I watched this story or this episode twice. That kind of broke the wall, broke the fourth wall, and I didn't like that at all. That one threw me off the most, and I hated it for that. There are better ways of saying, I'm Sonic.exeing this. By stopwatch. Oh, this was 30 seconds. This was about 3 seconds. This is about 5 seconds. This is a single frame. Go back a little bit. Try to catch that again. Oh, there it is. I didn't like the whole, sorry, I'm being really specific. I just didn't like it. It killed the story. That parentheses killed the story. Even if there was a stopwatch, that'd be one less thing for me to gripe about this story. Again, I'll leave it at 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10. Okay. Valiant effort. Just write about what you know. I said that before, but I'll say it again. Write about what you know. That's the best piece of advice you could ever get. Even if you have to research it. Write about what you know. It is so important. Alright, I'm done ranting. So if you liked this rant / creepypasta read, this video, hit the like button and encourage my bad behavior. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Your viewership means everything, and I love everyone. If you want a specific story read, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to read something for you, because you're special, and I love you. Don't forget to share this video with all your family and friends. And if you want me to read something that I've written, see if I can do any better, also say so in the comments below. And with that, I will see you next time. Bye!